All right, good day, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. My name is Matt Fifer. We're super excited to continue our Ask Anything series. Today, Buster Arnwine and the team from Fusion Retail Group is joining us to have a conversation about pricing strategy, and that's something that a lot of people don't really honestly want to talk about, at least not in groups with strangers. It's just something that's not always comfortable to talk about. But Buster and his team have got a lot to share about the subject, and we're excited to dig in. So, Buster, if you would, why don't you start by introducing yourself, and then the members of your team can do the same.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Good to be here. Exciting topic that everybody's excited and not excited to talk about, I'm sure. I'm Buster Arnwine, 20 plus years of CPG experience. And I started Fusion Retail Group with a few other partners last year. And we are a CPG revenue jump team. So we do brokerage and consulting and also agency work, run marketing, sales, and e-com on it.
Yeah, I'll go next. My name is Jeremy Howlett, and I head up growth, specifically on the digital side for Fusion. I come from a background of both CPG, but also co-founder world. 15 years ago, I started a running shoe company called Ultra, grew that, and that sold for $140 million to the VF Corp. And so I've got a lot of experience in kind of playing with pricing, both at retail and online, and using online to really make decisions to help drive retail decisions.
All right. My turn. Hi, Susan Marchak with Fusion Group as well. And I have a similar background as Buster. My background is 20 plus years in CPG as well, working with several different retailers and the different categories. So super excited to have this conversation with you all today.
So, Buster, we're going to start with sort of the news, I guess. There have been some headlines in the last couple of weeks. You know, inflation went from being transitory, and then it decided to hang out with us for a while, and now we seem to be at a point where we're trying to figure out who's to blame for it sticking around. And the FTC announced that they were launching an investigation into trying to understand and ultimately place blame on potentially retailers and CPG brands for the lasting effects of inflation. I'd love for you to sort of comment on that and offer some insight for what it might mean to retail and CPG.
Yeah, look, it's very interesting seeing all the news. It's been a really wild couple of years with pricing, right? Inflation and I think, inflation kind of got ahead of its skis a little bit. And from a consumer like budgetary standpoint of discretionary spending. And so now we're kind of in the spot where groceries have gone up 25% in the last 4 years, specifically. And I think other categories as well have pretty much followed that. And that's well above what actual costs have gone up, particularly right now as they're going down, right? So people are looking why, right? Pricing is very complex, and there's a lot of regulations around it and to protect consumers. But at the end of the day, I think really what happened was a combination of a few things. But really, when inflation starts going, and this is going to be I'd like to give behind the scenes things of how it happens. Inflation typically is an excuse, not a reason to take price increases. And that's a very provocative statement on purpose because that's the truth, right? When inflation's going, and we've seen it in real time over the past 4 years of people, large players taking very large increases above COGS to increase profit margins. You can see it in all their financial reports. And then a lot of the smaller players, we work with all sizes, probably not taking enough. And so the COGS have gone up more than they've done it, and they've compressed margins, right? So it's a very interesting cocktail, but the end result is, right, the retailers have, take the price increases and they have to manage their profit while also making sure that they can actually convert shoppers, right, without price points and manage the total basket, their profitability. And so what we've seen is they had to pass the price increases along. I think there has been expansion in retailer profit. I don't think some retailers probably a little more opportunistic like the manufacturers, but other ones are increasing profit. I think you're seeing it through other non-pricing actions to extract money from manufacturers. So look, the Is there a fault? No. I mean, I think the fault is everybody is the prisoner's dilemma. Everybody is getting as much as they possibly can in the time of inflation. And then now they're figuring out, look at some of the major beverage players. And then while I'm walking into Target the other day, looking at a category for a client, and I saw more new low price stickers and promo than I've ever seen, right? And it's going to compress profits. So at the end of the day, it is everybody making those decisions to maximize profit and then having to pass those along and honestly reacting to what their competitors are doing, right? So no one simple thing, but it is quite a bit. Profit's really driving everything. Ion profit is driving all of what we're seeing from a retailer's and manufacturer standpoint in terms of price increases.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of questions submitted in advance of this panel discussion about sort of the if, when, why, and how to take price increases among some other things as well, pricing stability and price strategy more broadly. But let's start with the first question. When should you take a price increase, and what is the best way to deliver it? And I'll let y'all take a stab at that one.
I think I'll jump in right off the bat. Like that's a really hard thing to decide, right? Like I think we've seen a lot over the last couple of years that companies just want to jump into this trend and okay, I need to raise my prices. Sometimes it's due to the need for more profitability, right? Their costs may have increased. But one of the biggest things that we need to be careful with as we take price increases is what effect that will have on our brand in the long run. Because if consumers don't respond well to our price increase, then we have to play a high-low strategy. And then we start to become a discount brand. And especially online, then everybody just starts looking for a discount code, right? Like, okay, I'm only going to buy when I get a discount code because they've started running a lot of promos because inventory is not moving. And so that's where online can be a really good player. There's a lot of apps if you're on the Shopify platform that you can plug into your website to test price. And so you can test price among small groups or select landing pages, that type of stuff, to start to see, okay, how well do these resonate? Does it affect my conversion rate? Does it affect my customer loyalty? Like, what does that do? Because if you start to raise your price and customers don't respond well, then you're either stuck over inventoried or you got to start discounting, and then you become a discount brand. To Buster's point, what he saw in a major retailer the other day. And so if you don't want to play there with the brand, you got to be really cautious on price increases.
Yeah.
And I would also add to, this is where your true partnership and transparency comes into play with your retailer partners, whether they're online or brick and mortar, when you're talking about timing, right? There is no great time to take a price increase. I think a price increase is probably the last thing that anyone wants to do. So internally, you're making sure that you're cost cutting wherever you can before you take a price increase. But if you do have to, I think transparency is the biggest thing that I can talk to, because it's the trust and the partnership, and that's going to make the conversation easier with your retailers and truly having them understand why you're doing it.
There, just to simplify, look, there's price increases there's a couple just buckets of reasons that it typically falls into of why people are looking at one. One is you have no real growth opportunities, no innovation, no anything else like that. And you need to generate some top line and or bottom line. And that's one that you see in a lot of different categories. I've played in some that it's like an annual increase because you can't innovate because it's very regulated. And that's the only way to really grow, right? Because you couldn't grow your consumer base in that one category. So that's the dynamics that do play in that. And then the other piece is actual increases in cost of goods, or actual increases in marketing spend or some other things that you want to fund, right? And so if you're trying to protect your bottom line, your EBITDA, your net income, because you have marketing, you want to do more, it's a lever to pull. And then the most people always think of the COGS, but again, commodities go up and down, right? And we always talk about them going up. We don't talk about them going down. And so, it's typically, again, it's an excuse, not a reason. I will tell you a quote I got from a very senior person early in my career. I won't mention the company. or what I was doing, but it was a very senior person, and commodities were going way up. Right, every few years we got way up, big downs, and they said this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to grab profit. And I think, that's the behind the scenes thinking at the companies, larger companies doing it. So if you're trying to pad your bottom line or your top line, which top line is questionable, you got to be really careful, like Jeremy was saying. And then the other reasons is you want to fund some things, right? Or you don't have any good innovation. So really, it's the result of either natural forces and commodities, or you honestly poor business planning on your part of growth planning over the couple of years, and you're running into a plateau.
Yeah. Good stuff. So you talk about the sort of the two reasons why you take a price increase. One is just wanting to layer on top line growth because you don't have anything else exciting, going on. The other is to react to cost increases. The third, and probably more attached to the first point, is following a competitor. What if you've got a competitor in the category that takes a price increase? Is that a good enough reason for you to be thinking about following them?
I think it depends on the position of your brand. Because if you want to be perceived as a premium brand, then yeah, you might have to follow your competitor, right? Or lead in front of your competitor. But if you're looking to be a value-based brand and like you want to be the value in the category, it may not be the right time to follow your competitor, because then you might be able to make some more headway against your competitor as the value-based brand.
Yeah. And I would say, are you in an advantage because your competitor did take a price increase? Are consumers switching to your brand, right? So, and you got to look at the market dynamics as well.
Yeah. And Jeremy, you alluded a moment ago to some of the risks of taking a price increase that ultimately impacts, demand. What are some of the ways to sort of fix that? If a price increase ends up doing more harm than good, how can you recover from it?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways, right? Like one is increase selling the value of your brand, right? Like your product, what separates you from your competitors, right? Like so that you can justify the price increase. I think that's using marketing, using your outreach, your social, your emails, those types of things, display packaging, right? Like what are you doing to increase the overall value of your brand to say, okay, this is why you should be paying more for us. Sometimes that can be more costly than just looking at doing a price rollback, which would be the next option, right? Is okay, let's roll back the price and let's bring it back down. So you really have to kind of weigh those options, and maybe testing in a smaller retailer to see how that works, or testing online. But I'm all for testing any possible way that you can test. Try and figure out which resonates the best, because there's a lot of risks whenever you change price, right? Like there's risks in price increases, there's risks in price decreases. Yeah. I've worked with a lot of clients in the past that weren't pricing their products high enough, right? And so they weren't standing out, and when they increased their price and stood out, then they started resonating with better with customers, right? Like we look at Apple's a good example of that, right? Like they priced themselves more than Microsoft products, HP products, right? And so they stood out and gained market share because of that. That's not always going to work. They had to definitely build value into their product and be this premium brand, right? We see it in fashion all the time, but we have to be careful as we look at, okay, when I'm increasing price, when I'm decreasing price, the best thing to do is to be able to find ways to test that. And that's where your website can come in really handy to try and figure out, okay, work with your e-com team to, okay, how can we test this price decrease? Because we've got to roll things back, right? Because customers have left our product. We're not moving off shelf as fast as we were before. So what can we do?
Let's shift gears a little bit, because I'm really curious what your thoughts are with respect to the posture that a retailer might take. What are some of the tools that they've got in their toolbox in order to get the most concessions out of you as you're trying to negotiate that increase?
I would say from experience, the first response from retailers, that's not happening, right? That's always going to be their first response. So this is where you do a lot of preparation with your leadership team, executive team. Everyone's aligned on what that pricing strategy is going to be moving forward. And then you talk about the steps, right? If you are requiring this, price increase and you're a big brand, you have the leverage to say, okay, then we're going to not ship you anymore, right? And you're going to be at a disadvantage in the market. That's only with big brands or brands that are in demand. If you're a small brand, you can't. Obviously, you don't have the leverage. The retailer has the leverage there. So this is where a lot of preparation and research and data and analytics come into play, because like you said, the retailer's initial response is going to be, no, I'm not going to do it. This is where you bring your data analytics to show why. Number one, where are the cost increases on your end coming from, and to show them. And again, this is where that transparency and discussion comes in is, guess what? Target, Walmart, my profits decreased by 40% because I've been eating this for a year. I can't do that anymore. I'm going to be out of business if I continue to do that. So again, bringing that open dialogue and being open with why you're doing the price increases. And again, this is having discussions early on, so it's just not a surprise to the retailer either. And this is where, again, what are you giving the retailer, right? That's maybe I'll give you a special buy at the end at the old cost, to bump it up a little before I do the price increase. So I think a lot of dialogue, a lot of negotiation that needs to happen, because again, the retailers are, first initially going to be like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from more of you. Talk about your experience as retailers have applied pressure and tried to reject those price increases.
I've designed national price increases and I've delivered a lot of price increases. So, look, if I was going to simplify it, it's a negotiation, right? There's nothing fancy about it. It is just hard, old school negotiation.
With carrots, with carrots and sticks, right?
So the very big variables are retailers have space and can get you in front of their shoppers. Manufacturer has the brand and the brand equity, right? And so the more equity you have, the more leverage you have here, the more space or options you have to drive it with their shoppers, they have more leverage, right? Now, so for example, Walmart, a lot of leverage, a lot of shoppers, a lot of everything, very valuable space. Smaller ones, you don't get as much pushback, they don't have a lot of leverage, right? A brand coming in that you can't get rid of, a lot of leverage, right? And so if it's a brand that everybody knows, like a Tide or something else like that, right? You can't get rid. What are you going to do, right? Now, it's a game of inches, and so you go back and forth. And what everybody's trying to do is protect their own interests. I think that's what people got to remember. And it is they're trying to get their profit. They're trying to maintain their profit, but also not lose shoppers and maintain their brand as a retailer, right? And so you got to find the intersection, but you need to cost in pain. And you need to when you do price increases and design them, you have to cost in trading. You have to cost in other things. You have to cost in penalties that they're going to take away promotions, take away items. It happens, and you need to be okay with that. Don't be surprised when it comes in, because they have that. Now, what you do as a brand, if they give you pain, then go lean in with another retailer, right? Or overdrive if online. Go to a different channel. Plenty of stuff you can do with that. There's a lot of levers when you're managing the total market with a national brand.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think retailers are worried about a couple of things. They're worried about a lot of things, right? But product needs to move off their shelves. And so when it comes to price increases, I think there's a couple of things in my experience that retailers are concerned about. One is, am I going to have to discount this later on because it stops moving? Or two, are you going to start leaning into more discounts on your web or Amazon or other online platforms, which is then going to drive business away from me? And so you have to come, as Susan mentioned, right? You've got to come in with the data to really support your decision. And then you've got to show confidence. You've got to deliver confidence to the retailer that, okay, we're not going to undercut pricing. We're not going to this is our new standard pricing. This is what we're going to keep, right? Like this is our new MAP policy. Like we're going to live by this. And if the data supports it, and if you're coming in strong with a MAP policy, there's going to be more confidence in and willingness to take that price increase. But without that stuff, retailers are going to be extremely leery to accept a price increase because they're afraid they're going to see stuff stop moving off their shelves, or that they're going to have to discount it down the line, and that becomes very problematic.
Think about EDLP retailers, right? So let's talk club mass, basically, right? So let's just take Costco and Walmart, right? The ones everybody likes to think about. They have levers to pull, of course, right? You can do rollbacks, you can do MBMs, you can do whatever. But they don't have as many as other channels, right? And so Jeremy's really good point, but like to really clarify what's in the back of their head. In Walmart and Walmart's very hard to deliver price increase to. I know firsthand. And you can get it done, right? But they're worried they get the EDLC, then they make the EDLP, right? And pricing is a sole discretion of retailers, just like pricing is sole discretion costing of manufacturers. And then once they're locked into a price, they can't do a lot. But if you did get over your skis a little bit, which is what we're seeing, then other chains. We were traveling last week in a Kroger division, and in another category that's probably increased way too fast. And in that, they had a sale that was probably 20 or 30%. Then they had a digital coupon on top of that. That took it down to about 50% off on a very, very big, well-known brand that And so one, I don't know, how Walmart or Costco would think about that compared to their items, but that's what's in their head. And you got to remember that is they know if you go up, I need to maintain price advantage. They understand stuff goes up over time. It's all about like, if they get caught with a higher price than a non-EDLP customer consistently, they will lose that shopper. And that's a legitimate concern for them. It is real.
How do you know how much of a price increase to take? I mean, talk about the dollars and cents of things and percentages and just what goes into that decision.
You take as much as you can get. That's the answer. And I'm being fully serious. So it is because if you're going to go through the exercise of pain, and it is an exercise, it is a tough one, then you need to get everything you can out of it, because the last thing you want to do is do a price increase every year or every 6 months. So you need to go get as much as you can and you look at the trade-offs. And honestly, it is all about elasticity and how much pain you think the retailers are going to give you, right? Elasticity for online and offline. And then how much pain you're going to get at other places, and looking at the competitive landscape. And it's a trade-off. You may gain unit, yes, because I think part of this is, the rest of the team can talk to this, is you need to set your brand pricing right at first, right? That's the number one thing to do. You put yourself in the right position for this. But you look at, and this is what happens in boardrooms on every price increase, is you look at how many households and how many units I'm going to lose on this, how much revenue I'm going to gain, and in P&L exercise, price increases flow straight down to the net income at the very, very bottom. So they're very attractive from a P&L standpoint, but you need to look, how many houses do I lose? How many units do I lose? And then how much activation do I lose? And then how long will it take me to back it up? And then you net it out and see, are you hitting your financial target that you want to be able to tell your stakeholders?
In order to do that, again, playing to what Buster said, you have to do the due diligence, right? Again, making sure that you understand the market, where are you as far as price indices compared to your competitors, to the category, what's the category average, has the category average gone up? And again, how much pushback or how much, how much is the retailer are going to compromise to take? So I agree with Buster. What he said is you take as much as you can, because that's the last thing you want to do, is do a price increase year after year after year. But you got to do the due diligence to make that happen.
And you really need to make sure that your customers are going to buy at that price. So, you can do all the work and run the math and all of the scenarios. But at the end of the day, you really need to make sure that you've interacted with your customers, you've pressure tested pricing, you have a good idea of what the threshold is that your customers are comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. It's part of the value of having a D2C business as well. It's easy to run A/B split testing on pricing, run it for a handful of days, hit statistical significance, and you'll have better data around what your conversion rates actually are or will not be. So that becomes very powerful data that you can plug into your forecast and your scenarios. It also gives you confidence to walk into a retailer and tell them, hey, we're not just walking into this willy-nilly doing math inside our own organization. We've tested this in the market. We know it to be true. Here's the value. And then the second side of that is, I think it's really helpful if you can speak to your retailers about the messaging and how you're justifying the price increase, how you're going to market with it, and how it's being rolled out across the board, not just inside their four walls.
I also think there's a few other ways that you can do this too. And to reference, like, one is roll out a new product, right? Like if it's a new model, new version, depending on what market you're in, right? Like what type of product you're dealing with. Sometimes you can bake those price increases just within a new model. In footwear, that's when we'd roll out a new model and we needed a price increase, we'd add $5-10 to the MSRP, right? So that was kind of easy. Another strategy is to reference Apple again. Apple years ago only had one iPhone. and then when they wanted to make a new iPhone, but they needed a fancier one with better cameras, with better technology, well, now you've got the standard, you've got the mini, you've got the pro, you've got the pro max, right? So now you've got 4 different variables, and the pro max is twice as much as the mini, but it's got all the bells and whistles. The mini's a little pared back, right? So you can look at kind of having this mixed bag strategy. And sometimes you can get retailers on board with that if you've got a justifiable reason to have multiple models of the same or to roll out a new model. Those are some little easier ways to bake in some price increases without cannibalizing your current consumer, and being able to lean into it that way.
And what a great way to land and expand on a planogram, right? Take over the category a bit in that capacity if you're leveraging pricing into carrying additional SKUs. And you look at what Moleskine did back in the day, they sold a square patch and they recognized that they had one product on one peg and that was about it. Well, they wanted to innovate, create something new. It's kind of tough to create something that's like connected to Moleskine and new. They come up with the idea of, well, let's just cut them up into smaller squares and then let's package them as a smaller application and we can charge more. So they increase price with essentially the same product, just packaged a little bit differently. And now they're expanding on shelf as well as having a sell up, sell down pricing strategy.
Yeah. Buster, you sort of answered this in part earlier, but I want to go a little bit deeper. What do you do if a retailer rejects the price increase? What do you do next? What are some of the other alternatives to a price increase if you just get a hard stop?
First, I think going back to my prisoner's dilemma comment, right? Because pricing is discretionary for everybody. You obviously can't collude or anything, obviously, right? So it's a guessing game. Now, when you said, how do you react when competitors go, let me use this example. Try doing a price increase right now to an EDLP customer or retailer versus 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago, it was free, like open, like you can go, everybody's doing it. And here's the thing. The only thing they can do is increase private label, but they're not going to do that too much. If everybody's taking price increases, your pain's a lot less because they can't threaten you as much. If nobody else is, then your competitor can get all the activation at major retailers, right? That's just the first point. So that's something to consider when you're seeing things go around you is the macro environment. and how well is it going to be received, and what are people thinking. Second thing is, if they say no, you can't back off, because you can never give a price increase again. And unless you want to fold your brand, you're going to have to give price increases, because inflation is natural, right? There's nothing wrong with prices going up over time. But if you say no, then you honestly, as a company, you're probably going to have a really tough time, right? Because you can never get one across with a major retailer again. That being said, I do like doing everything. So really for me, it's about, like, if you have to win the battle, do everything you can before the battle to either avoid it or ensure you win it, right? And so with that being said, it's look at every price increase. Nobody likes it. Everybody likes the top and bottom line growth. And so if it's top and bottom line growth, there's a massive amount of levers for that. There's cost savings on it. There's premiumization, like Jeremy said. There's innovation. There's all these things you can do, and some are quick, some aren't, right? And you need to really exhaust all those things to get to it, right? And it's an exhaustive list, and have a really good reason to take it. If they say no, you're going to have to ride it out. And so you're going to have to take the pain, and you're going to have to weigh how valuable is my brand to them? Can they get rid of me or not? Can they knock me down or not? Right. And I've given price increases on brands that you have to have, right? Yeah. But -5% on $1 billion brand is not a good year, and you're probably not going to be getting promotions anytime soon if you're working on it, if you deliver that. So you need to do all the pre-work, and when they say no, you just don't quit, and you find a way. That there's a lot of scenarios where you may be negative on bottom or top line for a year, but knowing it'll come back in a year because you're in a penalty box or something else like that. But you got to keep on fighting, and you cannot back off. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to hear people's thoughts, because I mean, that's, to me, it's that clear. But it takes a backbone, and it takes a vision. It takes a financial plan for your brand. It takes all those things in a long view, because a short view, you always want to avoid that pain, but it's going to be much more painful in the long run.
Yeah, I would say in my experience, we have never backed down on a price increase. Once you say you're going to do a price increase, again, you move forward, right? And this is where we already talked about it, and I feel like we're being redundant, but this is how important it is to be prepared before you have these conversations. And there has to be alignment from the executive team all the way down to the, account managers, who have to, again, relay the message to the retailers, so that when the retailers come back and they're fighting the increase, you have the story, the data, the brand information, the category information to share with them. And this is where the negotiations, move forward. It's a negotiation. And at the end of the day, the price increase has to go through. So, like I said, I've never been in a position where we never took it.
Up to and including Stop Ship. I had one very large brand.
Yep. We've done that before.
The largest retail, that I got a phone call a few hours before midnight when Stop Ship was happening, and it didn't go. Look, if Stop Ship happened, it's fine. If I'm a business manager managing total brand, fine. You know what? If it's mass, fine. I'll lean into club. I'll give them more. I'll overdrive Amazon. I'll go to the grocery, whatever it is, whatever category it is. I can go make it up. But in the long run, it's healthier for my brand to stand my ground.
In the short and in the long term, right? Because it becomes a game of credibility at some point. If they know that you're gonna fold whenever they start to push, then they're never going to take you seriously as a negotiator again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about the last question I have here is it okay to, with respect to price increases, is it okay to cancel a price increase?
I would say in the past, I've never canceled, but we've delayed. So I'll take an example of, I won't say the company, but my experience during the pandemic, right? During the pandemic, consumer electronics skyrocketed. People needed to buy equipment for their home offices, right? So we were having a great time, sales increases that we've never seen before. But because of the pandemic, obviously we had issues with supply chain, components, all of that, to the point where there are specific components we were paying 100 times X cost because there wasn't enough out there. The demand was so high. And the costs of these components changed daily. And so we had already kind of communicated, you know what, we are going to take a price increase. We've relayed it to our retailers, but the increases kept happening. And it's like if we went through with it, we would be, again, doing another price increase in 6 months or a year. So we delayed it to make sure that the cost of these components would kind of plateau, or at least we could project where they would be so that the price increase would, help us in the long run instead of us, taking the price increase and then guess what? The components went up again 100 times. So didn't help us at all. So.
Yeah. We've got a lot more questions to get through, but I've got a few of my own that I don't want to skip past, and we may end up needing to come back and have a part 2 to talk about price setting. Maybe not. We'll see. But Buster, I'm curious what you and the team think about the FTC probe. Do you feel like the industry is taking it seriously? Is it just sort of election season, attention getting? Is it something that brands and retailers are taking very seriously?
Look, I mean, who knows actual, real driving forces. Now, what I do know is Europe took a very serious look at it earlier this year and last year. And I think they're probably looking at that as one thing. The other thing is like it is very, very, very noticeable on disposable income tightening and what it's doing in terms of units and velocities out there, right? And so I think they're seeing some stuff. And look, the numbers are just outrageous. Like I said, the 25% in a couple of years is outrageous, right? And there's some brands, I've heard of some big ones, and I know that like they were taking big ones every 6 months for a while, right? I mean, so it had to be addressed. I think it is what it is. Now, I think from what I've seen, what's interesting is they seem to be focusing on retailer and, retailer margins. I think profit has been it's been good. I don't think it's because of price increases, because most of the time in a price increase, your IMU, as Walmart would call it, but every retailer's got something different, right? There's probably a lot of Walmart crowd watching this, but is their margin, their initial margin, it's going to stay about the same. Like you don't see a retail given a price increase, and a retailer's just trying to hang on, right? Like they're trying not to lose their shoppers and not jump the shark on the price points, right? So if you're 35% IMU before, for example, you're not going to see it go to 40 or 45 probably, because if it stays at 35, they're making more pennies anyway. And they're not wanting to get too far ahead either. That's why it's interesting. Like they're focused on retailers. I think the retailer profit expansion is from where retailers have figured out, oh, okay, I'm going to make my money off data. I'm going to make my money off fines. I'm going to make my data off all these other slotting,
retail media.
Retail media, 100%. Retail media is a huge driver of profit, by the way. So like they're that's where their profit's coming from, right? And also everybody's getting more efficient and all these other things. So that's what it is. Again, my theory is that the pressure is coming much more upstream of everybody doing the price increases. They're padding their margins, and retailers were hanging on with that and finding other ways to take money out of the manufacturers, which then are paying more in these other things that eat up a lot of your price increase. So you're starting to get in this little cycle. If you start to notice this logic cycle of like, okay, everybody's doing something different, and this is going to start compounding, right? And the consumer's going to lose, right? Or the consumer's going to be tightened up until everything smooths out probably over the next year or two.
Yeah. You just introduced my last question, at least for this section. I posted a poll on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago asking to what extent are retailers responsible for inflation by way of the taxes that they are placing on their suppliers, by way of fines, by way of selling data, by way of a push for retail media. And it was a small sample size, a lot of looks at the poll, but it was a hot potato. Nobody wanted to touch it. But I, still a decent number. The 85% said that retailers had significant responsibility because, obviously if you're a supplier and you're buying data and you're paying fines and you're investing millions of dollars in retail media, somebody has to pay for that. And ultimately the consumer pays for that. So I'm just, without, I don't have any sort of, conspiracy theories by any means, but it just seems like when inflation decided to hang around, it was a great opportunity for retailers to really get aggressive in imposing these taxes, because the brands can sort of take the blame for inflation while they continue to do well with these other income lines. So let's just talk about that.
I think it's super interesting to look at that, right? Coming from a world of working with primarily specialty businesses, right? Like smaller mom and pop run businesses. A lot of that was just us having a rep in there talking with people, right? There were no extra taxes imposed, right? Like usually the retailer paid the shipping costs, and we had decent margin, but not a crazy margin. Like we could sell it to them at 40-45% margin sometimes. Oftentimes we'd give them discounts to get them to Keystone, but that was it, right? But then you go and you look at some of these larger retailers, and I go in, and even if I'm giving them Keystone margin and not more than that, well, then I start paying for shopper marketing. I start paying for slotting fees or end caps, or if I miss a ship window and I have to start paying for the right. Like now my margin, instead of being at a 50%, like, well, which to me might be a 35% net, right? Now it's going down to a 25%, 20% net. And that starts to crunch my numbers a lot versus like the traditional just going into your local hardware store or your local grocer or whatever and getting 35-40% net margins. Now with these big box, it starts to eat it up really quick in some areas if I'm not careful.
Yeah. Well, you think about the productivity loop at a retailer like Walmart. It all starts with everyday low cost. We're gonna operate for less, and then we can sell for less. But I don't know if Walmart and some of these other retailers can really. Does EDLC even exist anymore? When you think about all the ways that suppliers are having to pay to play.
This is one thing. Typically, like if I'm looking at with a client or just into the brand or even just talking to somebody, to understanding the difference between net pricing and then net revenues, and net pricing being what you sell it for, right? Obviously, you have to have fair market pricing as balanced across there. But then, there's net revenue, which is the price minus all the other trade spends, right? And things like that can go in. And so when we were looking at channels, and we manage all the channels, you look at the profitability, some with higher cost. Groceries always had a higher cost than mass typically, right? Even club for a while, right? Because there's a lot of efficiencies. But you see that kind of creeping up and equalizing, and it's going back and forth. And and we have to cost that in, and we know what it's going to be. But it's net revenue versus net pricing. You need to look at both when you're looking at your P&L. And I think that's. Wow, I lost my train of thought.
Is EDLC dead?
Yeah. Look, my argument is it never existed like people think. I think it's imaginary, just like MAP pricing. I know Jeremy mentioned it. That's one of my pet. It doesn't work. You can't regulate pricing and market. It's not even legal. You can withhold funding, and honestly, it's a waste of time. I'd love to have another session on this too, because we could talk about price setting and how do you stabilize a market in the ways that you can stabilize a market, because that's a very interesting discussion, and it's very critical to get it up front versus on the back end. But no, I mean EDLC, everything's so blurry. Particularly, you need to look at the net pricing you're giving, but really it's the net revenues, and having floors on your net revenues is the only way to really manage this really, really tight. And that includes Amazon. That includes D2C in the omni portions of any kind of offline retailer as well.
Yeah, very good. Well, let's go around the room, if you will, as we wrap up. Any final words for a supplier with respect to helping them make a decision about whether it's time to take a price increase, or advice on how to actually execute that price increase? I'll give you each sort of the final word.
I'll start, and I think I've been saying it throughout this whole session. It really is doing the due diligence and making sure that you're prepared if this is something that you want to move forward with. And it's doing market analysis, it's doing consumer analysis, it's testing, it's looking at your internal P&Ls, right? And if you want to push the increase as high as you want, what is it going to take internally as well as externally? But at the end of the day, you're going to be negotiating. So how prepared are you on these negotiations to make it happen?
Absolutely. Data plays such a big part in that, right? And finding the data, knowing the data, like having the data to support the decision. And whether you get that from retailer or you get that from your D2C brand or your Amazon, running tests, but also understanding your brand positioning, right? Like where does your brand position in the marketplace? How does it position against your competitors, against other players in the market? And being cognizant of that, as I mentioned earlier, right? Like the last thing you want is to roll out a price increase that then needs to be rolled back. And so you want to make sure that it is like, it's the right play. It's the right play for your brand. It's the right play based on the data that you've seen and the tests that you've been able to run, as both Nick and I had mentioned, A/B testing within your e-commerce world as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I would just exercise caution when making that decision. It's not a boomerang. You throw it out there, you make that change, it's not coming back. So you need to be really, really convicted, both in sense of qualitative and quantitative data, that this is the right move, because once you go for it, you're in. And even if you can renegotiate or pull back or, claw it back in some fashion with your retailers, you've really you've really created a gap between you and your customer at that point. They've lost faith and you've lost credibility, and it's a hard thing to regain. So be careful.
That's true. And then I regained my thoughts just real quick on the retailer tax. It actually hurts the medium and small players more. On large players, typically what you see is you have a lot of P&L complexity to play with in terms of mix of channels and items. And so honestly, shifting some money out of different working media spend or different shopper marketing or customer, it's honestly, that's what they do. They don't spend more typically. It just shifts, and there's a lot of buckets to get it from, and they're very, very clever about doing it. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But what happens is, so they're getting it up, and then by the way, they can do a price increase much easier because they have the brand equity. But the small and medium players, that's where their COGS go up faster and harder because they don't have scale. They don't have the brand equity quite yet to kind of have the leverage in those relationships, but they have to take the tax still. Look at Luminate. The minimum price of play, still a lot of money for small retailers. And you look at the media, all this stuff, it's difficult, and they're having to pay the price because they don't have all the other things. That's why I don't like it too much. I like even playing fields, and I like the underdog brands having a fair chance and all these other things. You know why? Because they're innovating and the big ones aren't, because the big ones have all those other levers to do, right? And so we like helping all of them out, but that's the thing that kind of grinds me the most on it.
Yeah.
And then my final thoughts on price increase are typically, I think price increases is a lazy move by professionals. Most of the time when I see it, is a lazy move. Yeah, I think it's from people that want to do price increase. Like I said, it's the best thing you could ever do on your P&L because it flows straight from gross sales, 100% intact to net revenue, 100% intact down to your contribution margin, 100% intact down to your EBITDA, minus any kind of taxes that you have to pay in terms of for retailers and or loss of households, right? But it's typically what people go to first, and they're like, I want to do this, and they're not doing all the other things. You need to find all the other ways to give yourself timing so that you can delay it. Like that's the top and bottom line enhancements without doing it. And then The other piece is have a really good reason to do it. I'll say this: I've had easy price increases with hard retailers before because you know what? I had really good charts, and frankly, like the COGS were going up, and like it was a rational discussion. I've had to get price increases through with COGS declining, and I had to find a way to convince them of that. And I used a marketing angle and et cetera, right? And we eventually got it. But that was a very, very brutal one, right? So have your reasons and ducks in a row, have all that, have a good relationships, and then don't let it, manage it right is fine. But don't be lazy saying, I need to grow, I'm going to price increase and go. That's the majority of the time I see it. And that's what I don't recommend. You need to do price increases. They are a natural tactic in the market. Just over time. They have to happen. There's nothing wrong with it, but you can't do it wrong. And just don't be lazy on it. Do your work and do the hard things first.
Yeah, very good. Buster, Susan, Jeremy, and Nick from Fusion Retail Group, thank you so much. Our conversation went longer than we thought, but I am really looking forward to coming back and having a follow-up discussion about price setting, price stability. The thing I love so much about your business, first of all, you're not like y'all are fearless. You're at the point you're in your career where you don't have to, worry about saying the wrong things. I appreciate the heck out of your swagger. The second thing is your hyper focus on bottom line. Driving top line sales is great, but y'all are all about bringing, as much as you possibly can to the bottom line. And I respect the heck out of that. So what's the very best way we need to wrap up quickly. What's the very best way for folks to engage you at Fusion?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
No, it's just two things. Find us on LinkedIn, Fusion Retail Group, or hit our website, fusionretail.net. Connect with us there. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to chat. So any way we can help grow your business, for sure. Grow that bottom line.
All right. Thank y'all. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you again very soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
You.